can give you the magazine for free, but I can't make you read it. You can make people read a lot of things on the internet. That doesn't mean they wanted to, and that doesn't mean they'll come back. At the end of the day, like all of the agency lies with our readers and lies with our community, and they are opting in. So I know if someone, sure, if they've purchased, but if they've actually even opened it like that, there is so much intent behind that.
Verena von Pfetten, we're really excited to have you today. You started your career writing about food, then transitioned into launching a magazine for people who also smoke weed, and then that morphed into your business, Gossamer, that you're running.
Yes.
Now, we're so excited to chat more about you, your background, the business, and all of those things. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
We're so excited. I feel like Gossamer was really the first time that I looked at a company that moved to rebrand something that had always been kind of marketed in a certain way in this like beautifully designed, like high, like very elevated taste level, just beautiful. And I'm really curious, like it was a huge risk for you. And I'm really curious, like what was the catalyst behind that?
Great question. And yeah, I mean, at the time, this was conversations about even the idea was maybe 2016, which feels in my mind not that long ago.
Oh
but
my
then
God, I know.
Yeah.
close
Can
to
we
a
believe
decade.
it?
Yeah,
It's a decade.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
The idea behind it, so my business partner David and I had met working together at one of our, I think both of our like first or second jobs out of college, and had stayed friends and worked on some consulting projects. And I was at a point where I felt pretty strongly I didn't want to go in-house or like more or less I didn't want to go work for like men anymore. To be really candid. I just felt like every job I'd had recently, I had been mentored by like incredibly powerful, passionate, driven, successful women who inevitably had some boss in some floor, 10 floors up that ended up making decisions without a ton of insight into the business. And I just felt, and that often happened, whether it was like on the investment side or on just like a C-level side.
Yeah.
I mean, specifically at Condé, I always found it very frustrating because so many of the editors-in-chiefs were women, but so many of the like CROs and CEOs were all men. And I just felt like I was not going to go back into that situation. So whatever I did next, I wanted to do fully on my own terms. And at the time, my friend David was exploring doing something in the cannabis industry. And at a certain point, he came to me and was like, you know, I know you're thinking about starting your own thing. I was looking more at the beauty space, and he said, would you ever consider weed? And he and I had smoked a lot of weed together, so he knew like that I had an affinity for the subject matter.
Yeah, let's hope. Yeah.
But I was like, look, I think that this truly was, maybe late 2016, early 2017. I think California had just legalized, but not like put it in, like implemented it. And I said, I think that's a great idea. I think there's a ton of opportunity. I think specifically women are underserved. I think specifically and I just sort of like rattled off all these things and then said, but I can't do that, but you should do it and keep me posted. I was doing some consulting back at Condé at that point, and I just like was trying to picture in my head walking into those offices and saying, I'm going to be unavailable for a little while. I'm starting like a cannabis business. And I was like, they're never going to let me back in the building. And this is like my this is my bread and butter. This is what I do.
Which isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Isn't that insane?
It's insane.
Yeah.
And so
because if you said I'm going to start an alcohol business, nobody would blink an eyelash.
No.
Yeah.
And that was exactly it. Like if I said, half the people I was nervous about saying this to, I'd get martinis with after work, or like if I came in and said I'm a little hungover, no one would bat an eyelash. And, so honestly, it was a pretty quick turnaround from there because the more I thought about that, the more irritated I was, and the more I felt that there was an opportunity because I know I'm not alone. And honest, I think it was like 36 hours later, I went back to David. I was like, actually, yes, let's do this.
That's amazing.
So that was the idea. And, but because of all of that, I felt very strongly about what the, branding and positioning had to be and, had very high standards for how we approached it, not just to elevate it, because I think that's complicated. Like it doesn't doesn't it's not bad if it's not elevated,
Yeah.
but more about Trojan horsing the conversation and making
Yes.
sure we would be met with respect so that we could, hopefully broaden the comfort level
Yeah.
and reach of the category.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, so like we've had Eva Goicoechea on
Yeah.
the podcast, and also Polly from Unbound. I've
Yeah.
heard them talk about, the opportunity in sexual wellness, and women don't want to go to the like seedy shop
Yeah.
in the weird side of town, like to get their stuff. And I think I'm guessing here, but it's probably a similar thing, right? So you're,
Yeah, for sure. It was both about making people feel comfortable with what we were
yeah,
offering but also from like the brand and partnerships and even just more of like a B2B reception side.
yeah,
We started with a print magazine. So while we always had the intention of layering in products and, building a brand off of that, our initial revenue was going to be partnerships. It was
yeah,
going to be advertising,
nice.
activations and events, and that was our background. That's what we knew. And my understanding of how a lot of those conversations works. One, it's easier to get handful of bigger advertisers than a ton of little ones.
Yeah,
And I also came from the world of fashion, definitely also food. So lifestyle and vices like actually do go quite well together. Like
yeah,
fashion loves its vices, food does, alcohol is in that category, smoking, like stuff that feels edgy, obviously, too, but it has to be presented in a way that is brand safe. And so, how that was probably our number one priority out of the gate. And then on the flip side, yes, it was making other people feel comfortable with the topic, but it was also about how it had been stigmatized for so long. And not so much as like our intention was never to leave all of that branding or even that community behind, but more to be able to show them in I think, a more multidimensional light. And I think, there's it's similar to the sexual wellness category. There's just a lot of like politi- poli- politicization. Oh my God.
politicization.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yes,
why
yeah.
can't I find that word? Politicization. Around cannabis. Obviously, there's also like legal ramifications.
Yeah.
And for us, it was how can we also build a platform that allows us entry into spaces that historically have not been open to cannabis,
Yeah.
and then what else can we bring in behind us
Yeah.
or with us or using that platform.
Yeah.
So yes, it was for customers, but it was also for like, brand partnerships and to be able to put the brand in places that are maybe more unexpected.
Yeah.
And then also, like I said, to be able to use that platform to then elevate some of the history and some
Yeah.
of the more marginalized aspects of the business as well.
You go ahead.
Well, I get the starting with the publication.
Yeah.
What was it like sort of like coming to that idea? Like, cause I understand exactly like what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
But like that must have been a really exciting time just conceptualizing that. And can you talk about the
Yeah.
catalyzing moment behind that
I
idea?
knew pretty quickly that I thought we should have a print product.
Cool.
That we knew we would start with editorial, but
Yeah.
I think out of the gate I was like, I think it should be a print magazine. It's funny because at the time I think of that as a little bit of like the heyday, not heyday, but like peak print media.
Yeah.
And then I think we hit another valley and now we're sort of back at like peak
Yes.
print media.
Yes.
But at the time, I had a friend of mine from high school had started Serial magazine. There was obviously Cherry Bomb was doing really
Yep.
well. Apartamento, you had The Gentlewoman. Like,
Yes. Oh, Gentlewoman.
and
love.
I feel
Yeah.
like those were in the conversation in a way that they hadn't been in a while. And I had also spent, at that point, 3 or 4 years working largely for brands, platforms, and publications to layer in editorial or to layer in e-commerce to their editorial. And what I was seeing across the board was that the places that had a very dedicated audience, even if it was tiny, were actually doing much better than
Wow.
the mass platforms, like
Interesting.
places like Glamour or Teen Vogue. It was all about like community and conversion, both from an ad sales perspective and from ultimately like a product sales perspective. And the idea with print was to be able to really build a community, but then specifically to make it our first product.
Yes.
I really wanted out of the gate to make sure that people understood the value proposition of what Gossamer was. Like, you give us $20 and we will give you a beautiful print product that you can keep on your coffee table for the rest of your life if you
Yes.
want.
By the way, I still have one of your magazines like on our bookshelf.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
It really is that beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. And so, and to treat it almost like a bit of a business card, but also truly like a product so
Yeah.
that people understood you bought something from us. So that was the idea behind print. And it just felt creative and inspiring.
Yeah.
Like I was like, everyone, I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of people on this side of the couch, and I'm sure you've experienced it on yours, that starting your own business is so difficult. And I don't think anyone can ever properly prepare you. Like, that is my takeaway, that everyone tries, with the best intentions, and they're encouraging, but like we'll say, you don't know how hard it's going to be until you're in it. And I was not prepared, full stop. But the more David and I think we're both like naturally more creative than anything, we just got excited and we're like, look,
Yeah.
we're going to do something. Let's do something that feels different and like creatively fulfilling and inspiring, and can really like play up the visual aspect and the tactile aspect of like, if this is for people who also smoke weed, no one wants to sit in front of a screen any more than they already are.
Yes.
And if they want to truly immerse themselves in something, that has to be a physical object. I want them to feel it. I want them to like engage with it. And I also, he and I met working at the Huffington Post. We, not for nothing, we sort of like built everything that is wrong with the internet now. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Say more. What were
Yes,
your roles there
yes.
at HuffPost?
We were both section editors. So we both started basically just after the HuffPost became more than just a flat homepage.
Yeah.
This was 2006, 2007. So
Wow.
it was like very early internet. And the company was launching sections. Which is, it's like explaining, a very basic thing, but that didn't exist. It
Yeah.
was just HuffingtonPost.com. And
Yep.
then they added like city sections. So David ran New York. I ran the living section, which is basically, I would say, a precursor to what Ariana now runs with Thrive.
Yep.
It was everything from like lifestyle and wellness and spirituality. And so we were like sort of micro editors of these like little fiefdoms, but so much of HuffPost was about traffic and positioning, and both SEO and like what headlines and how to get someone to click, because ultimately that's all that mattered, because we in turn were only driving to other sites. Like, was HuffPost all clickbait? Kind of, but there was only clicking. Like,
Yeah.
that's all there
Yeah.
was to
Yeah.
do. So I think we both sort of grew up in that world. And as we saw what it was doing to other publications, and it was really flattening everything, and I just, felt so strongly that putting like a Kardashian or a Hadid on a cover was not actually going to save anyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, we
Bless you.
Like, it's great, and they are interesting and all of those things, but I think you need to have a real point of view, and have intention behind people engaging with whatever you're creating. And here we're talking about media and we're talking about editorial. Both David and I at that time certainly could have spun up a website and figured out a way to get 1 million uniques to it in a month.
Yeah.
But like, then what?
Yeah.
And how engaged are they with us? And the thing I always think about with the magazine, and I think depending on the audience, if you're talking to someone on like the venture capital side, they'll say this doesn't scale. But I think everything sort of starts from this point, which is, I can give you the magazine for free, but I can't make you read it. And you can make people read a lot of things on the internet. That doesn't mean they wanted to, and that doesn't mean they'll come back. And so the idea that like at the end of the day, like all of the agency lies with our readers and lies with our community, and they are opting in. So
Yeah.
I know if someone, sure, if they've purchased, but if they've actually even opened it like that, there is so much intent behind that. That felt like the sort of the axle of the wheel, I guess, that everything else could grow from.
All right. So insurance is not exactly the sexiest topic, but when you need it, you really need it.
Oh my God, girl. Yes. When I was running Loopy, I had more than enough horrible claims to deal with. But thank God for Amelia Risk.
Thank
They
God.
were amazing. They
were.
picked up my phone calls, listened to me crying, and they had really good rates too.
So if you're a founder, you already have enough to stress about. So let Amelia Risk handle all of your insurance claims while you focus on your purpose and aligning that with your business.
That's right. And for all Say More listeners, you can get a free audit. So just go to ameliarisk.com because boring things like insurance should still be really good. Can you talk a little bit about your personal relationship with plant medicine and then also kind of going back to what we said at the very beginning, alcohol is socially accepted, other forms of substances, I'm going to call it, are not.
Yeah.
There's some forms of double standards, especially as, growing up in Europe, we have a different approach to some of that. And sometimes it feels a bit contradictory looking at how Americans think about it. So can you share a little bit about, your personal relationship with it and then also why you think
Yeah.
wheat specifically has been so negatively connotated?
So, I mean, so I grew up in British Columbia, Canada, which is, you know, uh, the sort of Humboldt of Canada. It's the California of Canada. It is where there's a lot of weed also grown. And so it was always around, I would say, like it in a similar to California way, just culturally.
Yeah.
Definitely not my parents. I grew up in a very like strict German household, but
we got to talk about that too.
yeah,
Later.
it was
Yeah.
something that I remember like as a kid, I would just smell it around, and as like an early teenager, that was something that was around. I remember like friends sort of experimenting with it, and I remember even like police sort of just saying like, "Could you guys like not do it at the playground?" That was the, and I recognized we were like, yeah, just like you like
move over.
be a little more subtle. And I recognize, we were largely like white kids in a pretty safe neighborhood, and
Yeah.
so we had probably a different experience. But on the whole, it was definitely just not that stigmatized in BC, and so it's something I think the first time I smoked weed, I was 14. I wasn't ever like super consistent with it, but I always enjoyed it, and so just since then, it's been a part of my life in some form or another, the same way a drink is. I think one, I always felt better the next day if I had chosen to like smoke weed than if I had had a couple martinis. I also, would experiment with mushrooms in like high school and college. I've always loved those the most. Not like crazy doses, but I just think like a lot of these substances, for lack of a better word, one, a lot of them have their roots in like very traditional medicine and traditional spiritual and religious practices.
Yep.
And that's certainly not how I am experiencing them, but I say that only that to sort of put them into context in terms of like being willing to experience life slightly differently or look at things through a
Totally.
different lens
And
or open your mind.
expand
Totally.
or dive deeper versus
Yes.
where I would sometimes feel like maybe this sounds like a conspiracy theory, but alcohol is very numbing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not expanding your mind.
Yeah.
It's not making you go deeper versus psychedelics, for example.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to
Yeah.
take those, right?
I'm drawn to those experiences. Like I have
Yeah.
a curiosity for them. I don't
Say more about that though. Why?
I'm happy to talk about this stuff. I've tried acid once. I was in my like 30s
Yeah.
and it took me until my late 30s. So I was like, acid, that's a really scary thing. But
Yeah.
like weed, a little bit of mushrooms, like that sort of those activities never gave me anxiety, I guess, or I never
Yeah.
had a ton of anxiety towards them.
Yeah.
And I feel fortunate I've never had a bad experience, but I also think so much of it is intention. And for me, growing up, it was like we would be out in the woods somewhere. Like I remember the first time I took mushrooms, it was like a beautiful sunny summer day, and I was with my friends, and it wasn't a large amount. And I just remember seeing this like field of grass and seeing the sun sort of behind the trees behind it, and everything just looked like it was sparkling gold, and I just was smiling the whole time. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, that's a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
I want everyone to have that.
Yes. Yeah.
And to your point, I think about alcohol, I think that's true. I think that's not true for a lot of these things too. I think it's just all about intention.
Mhm.
Like anything can be used to numb depending on how you use it. And so I also try to be mindful of how I don't personally want to glorify these things. I just think the more people talk about them, and I know from personal experience, the more I talk about them, the more people tell me things that I
Yes.
would have never expected.
Yes.
Psychedelics specifically too, even more than weed. For some reason, cannabis, I mean, I have a suspicion as to why large of it has to do with the politicization of it and the
Yes.
criminalization of it. But people are very, very comfortable talking about psychedelics in a way that they're not
Yeah.
still
Do you feel
comfortable
that
talking about
recently?
cannabis.
Yeah, do
Is that
100%.
you
recent?
still
Yeah.
feel like that's true?
No question.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
even up for
So
debate. Like I
still
could imagine a
associated.
conversation about psychedelics happening on the Today Show and
Yeah.
they would still never touch weed.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, but can't you? Like, I can totally see them
I
doing
mean,
like microdosing moms.
See,
Yeah, yeah.
see, but it's the same conversation
Yeah.
with like developing mediumship.
Yeah.
Like there are now words that are acceptable, like psionic or psi, right?
Mhm.
Like or telepathy,
Yeah.
or that people are talking about, but really they're just talking about psychics and mediums.
Yeah.
And for weed, it's like THC, or it's like what are the gummy, like I don't know,
CBD,
CBD,
cannabinoids.
CBD.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like there are acceptable forms of like speaking about it on, but you're
Yeah.
right. Like, especially with the, Michael Pollan and like
Mhm.
the Netflix series and like people being more, especially with around the conversation of PTSD and
Yeah.
how ibogaine and other substances and psilocybin can actually really help heal people. That said, like, have you done a mushroom journey, or are you just microdosing? Or
I have never done like an intentional, like deep,
Yeah.
supervised mushroom journey. No.
Yeah. Is that of interest at some point?
Yeah,
Or
totally.
Same.
I'd be
I
very
wanna do it.
curious. Yeah, I
What do you
mean, I
think?
think there's a lot of those psychedelics I'm very curious about. The psychedelics conversation has been largely managed by MAPS, which is like a nonprofit, international nonprofit, but based in the US. And they have had like that organizing cohort since the 70s, and they have been like laser focused on how they've messaged psychedelics from like both a legalization and a pharmaceutical perspective, and it's been very clear and very consistent, and it has been largely all about like some form of happiness or mental wellness.
Totally.
And cannabis has not had that. It has been much more fragmented. It was also much more
That's a good
Criminalized,
in
yeah.
a way that psychedelics
Yeah,
never
yeah.
weren't. It was also much more racialized.
Yeah.
Like cannabis was
Yeah.
criminalized against people of color. Psychedelics was like, mostly like white hippies that everyone kind of
Yeah.
ignored. So, there's a lot of reasons that cannabis remains a more complicated topic.
Yeah.
And because people also have a lot more opinions about cannabis. Is it recreational? Is it for, cancer patients? Is it for veterans? Is it for wellness? Is it,
Right.
Yeah.
and it's just been a more fragmented step-by-step
Yeah.
conversation.
That's
And
interesting,
psychedelics
like-
has been like approached very
Yeah.
holistically
Yeah.
and intentionally. So good for them. It's
Wow.
working.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I
Yeah.
didn't think about that. I'm very
I didn't
familiar
either.
with MAPS, but I
Yeah.
didn't think about
Yeah.
the fact that they've really created a campaign around
Yeah.
psychedelics for a very long time.
They've been playing the
and
long game for sure. I
created
mean,
a
there's
trusted
a lot
resource.
of other
Yeah.
people. I'm not saying it's only
course,
MAPS, but
of
like they're a
course.
very large organizing factor in the
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
And yeah.
And then what about research? I mean, I'm not so familiar with like, how the research differs in cannabis versus psychedelics versus like ketamine treatments for
Yeah. Well, I mean,
certain conditions.
a lot of these psychedelics were initially like pharmaceutical substances,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So like
yeah.
ketamine or MDMA, like those were
Yeah.
since criminalized. They were started as medicinal
Yeah.
or for therapeutic reasons. And so I think there is like a little bit of a legacy of research behind it. And then there's certainly very limited research on cannabis in the US because
Yeah.
it's still federally illegal.
Yeah.
So it's truly next to impossible to
Yeah.
do proper studies here. Most of them also have to be opt-in. So it's really hard to screen for other factors that might be impacting the results. I saw someone the other day talking on a podcast about how to the alcohol versus cannabis thing. Basically, they were saying it's inaccurate that cannabis is not addictive and that alcohol is more addictive, and that, less than 2% of adults who consume alcohol in some form are, have addictive issues
Right.
with it.
Right.
But more like 30% of people who consume cannabis have addictive. And I'm like, well, again, these studies are really hard to
Right.
say.
Totally,
A lot more
totally.
people are public about whether they consume alcohol.
Right.
What is the subset of
Of
people that you're talking
course.
to when you're saying like cannabis consumption? And I think it just hasn't been studied yet enough to really
Yeah.
give that answer or answer it accurately. But that's just, I think, an example of how these stats can get kind of
Totally.
twisted
Totally.
and
And
misrepresented.
with everything.
And they're all psychoactive substances. So
Yes,
like they all
exactly.
obviously have an impact, but I
Yes.
think what's getting missed there is the benefits, right, that
Yeah.
come with some of them
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
are studied in other parts of the world and that people have been reporting anecdotally or
Yeah.
in some of the limited research. And I think that's such a shame that
Yeah.
the US, that's so much on the forefront of innovation and research
Not for
in that
this.
area,
Yeah.
is truly still
No, most of the
lacking
best
behind.
research for cannabis is happening elsewhere. I mean, it's happening in the Czech Republic, it's happening in
Wow.
Canada, it's happening
Mhm.
in Uruguay. Like it's not happening here. That's
Have
for
you
sure.
have you seen a move like politically to kind of quash some of that research at all?
I mean, it's the problem with the research is just you can't do it when it's federally illegal
Well,
because
I
you
mean, like when there are studies that come out of the Czech Republic, like are there PR moves that people who are interested in sort of like
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Okay.
wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it goes either way. I think the thing with cannabis that most people are surprised by is that it is genuinely pretty bipartisan or
Yeah.
nonpartisan,
Yeah.
let's say. Like
Yeah.
most like it's a 50-50 split down
Yeah.
party lines.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
necessarily like a Democratic versus
Yeah.
Republican thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money tied up
Yes.
in weed.
Yeah.
You know, there's a
So
reason that
much,
Mitch
yeah.
McConnell was really supportive of the hemp industry, and
Yeah.
he comes from Kentucky, where
Right.
it's all legacy tobacco farmers
Yeah.
who needed a new crop to grow. So it makes
Yeah.
sense that he shepherded in the farm bill that legalized hemp, and now his constituents can grow hemp and cannabis. You know, like.
Yeah.
But Mitch McConnell is not someone who you would think of as
Yeah.
necessarily on the
Right.
forefront
Definitely
of like
not.
legalization.
Maybe he
but-
should smoke more.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the cultural part a little bit more? Especially your perspective, I think, is interesting because you have German parents. You grew up
Yeah.
outside of the US. You've lived here for a long time. You're building a business here.
Yeah.
Why do you think Americans struggle with psychedelics and weed and other
I think
types of
Americans struggle with all of it because I also think, I mean, I
We're
think the
so
American
uptight.
like culture, I mean, Canada too, around like alcohol is terrible.
Oh yeah, very unhealthy.
You know,
yeah,
it's
for
like
sure.
it's very, but I think so much of it has to do with like you're not allowed something,
Yeah.
right? And but it's marketed to you everywhere.
Yeah. Do you think religion has to do with that?
That's a good question. I was raised Catholic.
Yeah,
I mean, I
same.
think there's, you know, repression and guilt with all of
Oh,
Yeah.
for
those
sure.
things.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I do
And
think
control
obviously,
of people and organization.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think in general, like alcohol has been a very big business and the US, and honestly most of the world, but the US is a capitalist culture. Like that is like what
Yeah.
this country was built on. And it is the reason a lot of us are also like have started our own businesses and there's like
Right.
reasons for them. That's wonderful, but it's also at the end of the day not great.
Yeah.
And alcohol is a very, very, very big business
Yeah.
and is has a very rich history in terms of spirits here in the US. And so I don't know. I just think money talks. Money is probably more influential than anything else.
Well, in those industries, particularly here, like they are not interested in having to share market. Like
no, they're interested in having cannabis
Correct.
beverages in their portfolio so that they don't have to give up market share.
Yeah,
and that's,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Talk to us about the moment when you told your parents, your
Oh my God.
strict
I actually
German
didn't
parents.
tell my mom what I was doing.
I still don't know.
She knows now, but I swear for like the first year until the physical magazine came out, I don't think I just said it was like a lifestyle brand. And I was
Wow.
like, wellness and travel. And when I told her, it was just in advance of the first print issue coming out. And I believe there was a brand out of California. I think it still exists, but in some, zombie iteration called Bebo that was founded by Scott Campbell, the tattoo artist, and
Okay.
Clement Kwan, who came from Net-a-Porter and Yuke's group and had like a very rich fashion background. And they had sort of announced their business and come out. And I remember, I think they got an article in the Times or the Business of Fashion or something like that. And I sent that to my mom and then was like, read this and then let's talk.
Yeah, nice.
Because I was trying to show her that, it was okay. I mean,
Could be taken seriously.
yeah, kind of. And that
Yeah.
I wasn't, her, she just was like, so I think the first words out of her mouth was, so you're becoming a drug dealer, like that.
No way.
But I mean, when you just say, like, I'm starting a business in weed. Like, in her mind, weed is a drug.
Right.
And what is the business in
Right.
weed if not to sell it? And so you are, next step, drug
Is
dealer.
her concern from the fact that it is, illegal, or is her concern that she thinks
Both.
it's just not healthy, not good for you,
It
not
was
good for your
both.
brain?
I mean, her
Okay.
concern is much diminished now. And,
Yeah.
I feel like every other day she tells me, like, you're behind, like everyone, it's everywhere now. She calls it TCH because she can never
Oh,
remember
right.
Nice.
that
Nice.
that
I
it's
love it.
THC. But she's in her 80s and she's a wonderful, strong woman, but she's had a lot of health. She's had cancer many times, and
Oh, wow. I'm
she's
sorry.
she's great. She's an incredible survivor, but more recently we have been like, with sleep stuff and inflammation,
Yeah.
she's been experimenting with both CBD and non-intoxicating stuff, and
Amazing.
occasionally things with
Yeah.
THC because they
Yeah.
can be very helpful.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then she tells her friends. And so, the fastest growing demographic is 65 and up,
Yeah.
because drinking doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I think people are looking for alternatives to pills for a lot of their ailments, or supplements, or complementary to.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not an either or proposition so much as finding balance, or ways that are maybe have less side effects or feel more natural.
In terms of like starting this kind of risky, company in this risky branded space, like what are some of the ups and downs that you face? I mean, I know, like, I founded a undergarments and basics brand.
Yeah.
And I remember we were up for a partnership with Dell. It was like a talk series, and they had okayed every other panelist
yeah.
except for me because we had butts on our Instagram page. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, duh, but those butts are wearing underwear. Like, what do you expect?
No, I
Like,
know.
so yeah, I'm curious, like, what are some of the ups and downs of doing this?
Literally everything.
Yeah.
I obviously we knew this was going to be an uphill battle. That's one of the reasons we started with editorial and with a publication, because we were like, we want to avoid dealing with regulations. Like, we know
Right.
it's selling something. We didn't want to get a dispensary license. We didn't want to get a manufacturing license. We didn't want to deal with state by state regulation. So, like, all of that went in eyes wide open. That we wouldn't be able to have a normal bank account, didn't consider.
Wow.
That
Oh
we
my
wouldn't
God.
we wouldn't have access to funding that wasn't private capital.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right? Like, we
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
get a small business loan. We can't get a
Right.
bank loan.
Wow.
Even though we don't touch anything federally illegal, or even do anything with anything federally illegal. We are a non-plant touching business in that
Wow.
respect. We still don't have access
Yeah.
to all of those things. I mean, everything from even like Instagrams,
Yeah.
Metas, or TikTok, any of these like platforms, restrictions around the topic. Again, we sort of like intentionally tried to skirt that by being more editorial and
Yeah.
news and media based.
Do you have to like make up words like
Oh,
to,
yeah. And I mean, I can't even like that shop to open a store or Shopify. Like, we can't use traditional payment processors. We have to
can't-
use high risk payment processors. So
Wow.
they take an extra
Wow.
percentage of everything.
Okay, kids, listen
Yeah.
very deeply here.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, truly, you name one and a single aspect of starting a business,
Yeah.
and I guarantee you, there's some uphill battle or
Has that
restriction around
ever
it.
discouraged you, or do you feel like the need for the
I
strings
mean,
is
it definitely has. Like,
yeah.
when we've had payment processors shut down and hold on to tens of thousands of our dollars. We've had our bank accounts shut down with
Oh
money in that. Like, yes, it is discouraging. It's also very. I think limitations can foster a lot of creativity.
Right.
It has to.
Totally.
And so
Mhm.
I think it has forced us to be very, very nimble and also reactive, and to think about, I think, finding the balance between, a sort of saying David uses a lot, which is like to skate where the puck is going.
Mm.
And
Is
also
he
to like,
Canadian too, David?
no, it's funny. He's
The
from New
hockey
York. He's a
reference
city
is like,
kid.
yeah. Yeah.
To set ourselves up for the most possible like opportunities of success.
Yeah.
Because I think what we've learned in 7 years in this business is that things can change on a dime too.
Yeah.
Someone writes a new law and all of a sudden, like, whatever had
It
been working for
changes.
you
Yeah.
for 2 years is now no longer allowed. That, I think, has been beneficial for us. Obviously, sometimes very discouraging, but I don't know. When I look around, I'd say 90% of the businesses that started when we did don't exist anymore. And there's, these sort of like scarred, like embattled other founders that I know from this category who are like, we're still here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it feels
That's the
like,
thing I love about creatives, though,
Yeah.
creative founders, is that like we are just resilient, and
Yeah.
I talked about it a little bit on our last interview, but it's like you're not only relying on the creativity for the art,
Yeah.
it's the creativity in the business, and like how like you said, like looking ahead,
Yeah.
being able to feel out trends, being able to see the opportunities ahead of the curve, and like that's where creatives are so fucking undervalued.
Yeah.
Like
And brand matters.
Brand
I think
matters, yeah.
like I know that's such a common refrain of like, well, what is brand? Brand is meaningless. Brand is everything.
No,
There's
brand
like
is
40 different
every fucking
toothpaste
thing.
brands. What
Yeah.
makes you
Yeah,
pick up Crest
yeah.
versus Colgate? Like
Correct.
it's the same product. Let's be
Correct.
real. Brand is everything.
It's
Yeah.
the hardest part, I actually think, in the consumer business.
Yeah.
It's the
And
most.
most of the stuff inside all these tubes are the
Yeah,
same
Yeah.
in every
exactly.
category.
Yes.
The only thing that matters is brand.
Yeah.
Our friends at Tracksuit actually say,
Yeah.
they say brand is planning for future demand.
And that's a great way of saying it. That's sort of what David and I have been doing internally the whole time. We've just kept saying, let's focus on the brand. Like basically, let's build the frame.
Yep.
And then once we understand what we're going to sort of like power it with, and we'll test things on the way. I mean, just in something like cannabis, it's, what does that look like? Is it a dispensary? Are you making products? Are you selling other people's products? Are you doing accessories? Are you an events business? And I think we've been a little bit of everything, sort of very intentionally, in order to sort of test what works for us.
Yep.
And I think, where we've landed now, and certainly has been, most successful and honestly like very fulfilling. We always had such a strong community and customer base, and so much engagement. We never had enough to sell people, and that was because of the category.
Right.
You can't really sell online. We did a lot of collaborations. We had products in licensed markets, like in California. We had obviously hemp-derived, sort of non-intoxicating products that we sold directly. We did accessories, but that's not that just is. We never had enough to sell people, and I think more maybe in the last year, we realized like the number one thing people did come to us for was, what should I be buying and where should I buy it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we finally have enough to sell them, is how I describe it, and in a good way. So all of these brands that we have worked with over the last 7 years, or who we have supported from afar or encouraged people to shop, are now making products that are federally available. They're all made from hemp. They are intoxicating. They have enough milligrams of THC that you can feel them, but they are derived from hemp, so they are federally legal.
Wow.
It's sort of an interesting legal framework and landscape, but for us to be able to then support these brands, stock these brands, and like help our customer transact immediately has I'm sure everyone sort of feels it when they have that moment with their business, but for us it was like, oh, it's just working. Where
Yeah.
all of it, I think I used to describe being an entrepreneur as like dragging a giant boulder like up a hill with like a semi truck coming in the other direction, like
Yep.
pushing against you. And then, at a certain point I was like, okay, I think the truck's gone, but the boulder is still
Right.
there.
Right,
And now I
right.
sort of feel like the boulder's getting like,
Yeah.
it's like quite small.
Yeah.
So
That's incredible.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
How
Congratulations.
Has it been building this business with your business partner? So
Yeah.
somebody who you knew, who you had worked with before.
Yeah.
We're always curious. We've had business partners before as well, and we know it's can be challenging and also can be the greatest thing if it works.
Yeah, I mean,
Can you
that's
share?
my understanding. I've never been a solo founder, but I sort of feel like when I speak to solo founders, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, sometimes I wish I had someone to, share this with. But, then you talk to co-founders and like, sometimes I wish I could just make all the decisions myself. And I think no matter which one, it's always going to be basically
trade-off.
50. You're going to
Yeah.
wish for that
Yeah.
other thing.
Yeah,
Grass is
sometimes.
always greener.
Yeah. It's been good. I think because David and I, we had known each other for so long. So we met
That's super valuable.
literally in 2007. And then we started working together a decade later,
Yeah.
after both like working together on other projects, like consulting projects and things like that, and being friends, but not like very much part of like the same social group, especially all of this crew of HuffPost alumni who like came out, but we didn't like hang out every single week. And so it felt like just the right amount of like friendly rapport and understanding of each other, but also where, if you work all day with someone, you need to be able to like have some distance, or at least I do. And so I think we had, for me, it felt like the right balance, and has, I think, proved out because, we are still working together
Yeah.
now, 7 years
How are
later.
you? What are the different roles?
Yeah, so we have a lot of overlap, which was an interesting thing that, we talked about, or I certainly did. I think he did too. When, you're talking to other people about
Yeah.
going into business with a co-founder. The general refrain, I think, is sometimes, find someone who has like your opposite
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah.
That might be true. I don't know. We have a lot of overlap. I have a little bit more on the, I would say probably more on the organizational and like structure side,
Mhm.
from like a project management perspective, even from like a finances perspective. And then he, I think, has a little bit more on like the community building, creative, like advertising, marketing side. And then in between us, there's a ton of overlap. So that's kind of where the division ends up. But I think it's helpful because we both are very aligned on the general direction and how we look at things. And then I think we gently push each other in either directions. Like I will gently like
Yeah.
nudge toward the more practical, and he will gently nudge towards like the more like exciting ideas, and that
Yeah.
ends up being a really wonderful balance. And one of the things that are good pieces of advice I got from Claire Mazer and Erica Cerullo, who were the founders of Of a Kind, and now Claire and Erica and 831 or 831 Stories, because they had a lot of overlap too. Like they were both largely like editors, very very close friends. But I asked how they divided things up, and they sort of admitted that they never really did, and that they had a great approach to email, which we still use and I still love. Is they just truly CC each other on everything, and it's not for like, it doesn't mean they both have to do it all, but it's just for ease of visibility. And I still find that really helpful because I think it prevents a lot of unnecessary meetings. Like, I don't need debriefs. I can sort of like dip in and see what's happening if I need to.
There's also something that I kind of love about like you have when you have similar skill sets, you have a deep respect
Yes,
for
for sure.
what each other does.
Mhm.
And I think one of my biggest insights in business has been don't work with people you don't respect.
Yeah.
Because you'll always be like second guessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think there is something about that mutual like, respect that really helps to like pull the partnership together and push it forward in a lot of ways. So I think that's really cool that you guys have been able to sort of make that work even with the overlap.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
I feel like this question should come from you, but can you talk a little bit about your spiritual practices and how you talk about the ups and downs and the challenges and how it's so much harder even than what you thought? Like what do you lean on to overcome that?
That's a good question. So I'm not religious at all. I wouldn't say I'm particularly spiritual either. I do very much believe in downtime and off time. Like, and that's sort of how I work. Like
Yeah.
I am I'm very protective of my non-working time and try to be hyper efficient during my working time.
How do you do that? Do
I
you
just don't. I just like
you have the self-discipline to not check your
I
emails, to
it's
not
the only
be
way I can work, because otherwise I think I would just work nonstop.
Yeah.
So I'm very like a Monday to Friday. Of course, like
Yeah.
if something happens over the weekend, I'll do it. But if it's not urgent, I won't. Like I
Yeah.
will I'll see something come in and I will get back to you on Monday.
Same. Yeah.
And when I go on vacation, I am offline. Like I'm not responding.
Yeah.
You can call me if it's urgent, and then I'll get on it. But otherwise, it can wait. So that's one way. I mean, that neither of those is like a spiritual practice.
I don't know. I think shutting off is.
Oh, yeah, I
Yes,
totally
yes.
think it is.
Totally, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
being able to like clear
Yeah.
your plate and clear your head. Like,
And it's harder now
Yeah.
than ever. I mean, I just
Yeah.
deleted Instagram from my phone
Oh,
because
yeah.
I cannot have it
Yeah.
on there anymore. And I guess I just don't have the self-discipline to not get distracted.
Yeah.
And it's just, we always talk about this. We talk about fast food and fast information.
Yeah.
It's just too much. And so
it's
I definitely
garbage.
think,
Just
Yeah.
like, what is
Yeah.
this? And it's not helpful. And yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
read a lot. I read a
Ooh.
lot of fiction.
physical books or listening?
I use a
or-
Kindle.
Yeah, okay.
I love a physical book.
Yeah.
The Kindle is a practical
Yeah.
thing. I have it on me at all
Totally.
times.
Yeah.
It's like I'm pointing over there to my
Yeah.
purse over there,
Yeah.
so that I can basically whip it out. But I don't want to read on my phone.
Yeah.
And also for reading in bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That. So those are the two and
Yeah.
for vacation, then I can bring a lot of books in a
Yeah,
small little thing. So I do read a lot, which I think that is probably one of the most beneficial things I do because I really feel it when I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a mental exercise.
Yeah.
I find when I don't read or if I'm, you just like aren't into a book, I've now reached a point where I allow myself to find a new book. If
Yeah.
if it's
Yeah.
not taking and I find myself if I'm not reaching for it in downtime and I'm picking up my phone instead, I start a new book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to be much more like, no, you have to like force your way through it. And now I'm like, well, that just means more screen time. So I would rather find something that is really immersive.
Fiction, usually you said?
Yes,
Okay.
almost always. I really
Okay.
struggle with nonfiction. I love it. My general thesis, and I think I'm cribbing. I can't remember. Maybe Helen Rosner. Someone once said this, and I was like, this is exactly how I feel. I think most nonfiction books could be New Yorker length articles, like for my purposes. Like I need whatever.
I can see that.
This
Yes,
is not
yeah.
a knock on the work that goes into nonfiction.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
friends who write nonfiction, who have
Yeah,
books
yeah.
coming out that I'm so excited
Yeah.
for. But the amount of information I want
Yeah.
from it is
Yeah,
a New
yeah.
Yorker length article.
Yeah.
It can be really
I do agree.
long.
Yeah.
But
I find often I get really interested in books and then I see if there's a podcast interview with the author. And if it's a 2-hour interview, I'm like, nah, it's
oh,
actually
great,
like
that's it.
probably the most important stuff that I
Yeah.
should know.
But
yeah.
I think for like fiction, I mean, there's the other thing that I really have been able to put my finger on more recently, because even like nonfiction stories,
Mhm.
right? There are like, narrative stories that can be nonfiction. And I struggle with those. And I realized I need the immersion that is
Mhm.
allowed by fiction, that like whatever the author's perspective is, whether it's first person or third person, but where you're getting like the interiority of the subjects versus just the actions.
Yeah.
I've realized that's the difference for me. Like, no matter how compelling, and there are some like, David Grann books that are like the most amazing stories that you couldn't make up if you tried. But I've realized like without like that personal interiority of it, I
Mhm.
start to just my eyes glaze over. I'm less interested in the action and more interested in like what I'm learning about other people.
On Say More, we've discovered that the best ideas rarely come when you're distracted, uncomfortable, and not fully present in your body. It's nearly impossible to hear that inner voice when you're wrestling with your clothes, especially ones that are made of plastic and that don't breathe. By the way, 60% of today's clothing is made from plastic. That's why I founded the big favorite, super soft, 100% Pima cotton tees, underwear, and other essentials for men and women. They're simple, well-made, and designed for fit and comfort, sure to become a new favorite, so you can focus on the things that matter, like letting a good idea hit. Shop basics and underwear at thebigfavorite.com and use SayMore15 for 15% off your first purchase. Do you do that thing? Like I do this thing where I read, my eyes are moving, but I'm not like taking in any of the words. And then I'm like, shit, now I have to go back to the top of the
Start
page.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. But then somebody actually gave me the concept of speed reading, which is like, just let
Yeah.
yourself do that. And then you'll catch like the parts that you're meant to see or meant to read, like you'll catch those parts and like
Yeah.
that will integrate.
I think, I am a very fast reader. I think
Yeah.
most of the time that's what I do. I
Yeah.
mean, with certain authors and certain books, like I want to make sure I'm absorbing every word because I appreciate so much their writing style. But often, yes, I definitely read that. I know I read that way. It's been a very beneficial habit for most of my life to be able to read quickly.
Yeah. I'm really curious about because you said like you're not necessarily like a spiritual person,
Yeah.
but you did say about Lopez Island,
Yeah.
Washington, that you found your colors, your people, your childhood,
Mhm.
Book of Gnomes,
Yeah.
and a renewed appreciation for what it takes to make something quietly, carefully, and thoughtfully on your own terms.
Yeah.
But what does that mean to you and
Yeah.
in terms of spirituality?
So I'm not from Lopez Island. I'm not from Washington, but like the border
Yeah.
Yes,
from like
from
Washington to
Vancouver.
DC is
Yes.
pretty
Yeah.
porous.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Canadian-US border there literally,
Yeah.
looks like this. So I went out there for sort of a work trip, not related to Gossamer, but a friend and former office mate was working on a project with a brand called Ship Supply that is run by two women who are from Lopez Island. They make very, very small batch uh, pieces of apparel that are largely inspired by their upbringing and by like form and function. And so I went out with my friend Rachel, who was working on this project with them, sort of to help out and to also bring like an editorial perspective to what they were doing. I've spent a lot of time on islands in the Pacific Northwest. I both like with friends who had like cabins or just exploring,
Yeah.
whatever. But I realized I'd never spent a ton of time with people who were born and raised on those islands. And Lopez specifically has such like a rich history. I mean, those San Juan Islands in general, but Lopez, you know, had a rich history of a lot of like female homesteaders
Yeah.
going there in the 60s and 70s. Also has like a bit of like a queer history in terms of like a lot of women going there. It's a very like matriarchal society is a strong word, but like there is a community of like women who were raised by women who were raised by women.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the men were either you know, worked on ships or you know, fishermen
Yeah.
and things like that. So a little more
So they were gone a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was really interesting, and the appreciation both of these women, the two founders of Ship Supply, had for like how they were raised. I mean, they're like a just genuine like connection to the land. I mean, they were raised
Yeah.
in that way, but how everything they do just ties back to their culture, their community, the context in which they live. And I know how difficult that is. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
to build something like that and then put it out into the world and try and find, you know, your audience or your community or your customer for that. And to be doing it without outside help, to be doing it with, you know, also based on Lopez Island, not
Yeah.
based in New
Yeah.
York, where like, you know, this is a hard city, but you can also walk out your door
Yeah.
and find probably 10 people who can connect you to so and so to so and so and so and so.
Totally.
I had such a magical experience on this trip. I felt immediately at home in the physical environment, but it was so nice to then like be somewhere that looked like home but wasn't my home and to experience it as someone else's home.
Yeah.
I think I read something in the Atlantic somewhat recently that this came up during COVID with the way a lot of people like moved from the cities they were living in, but that there is like a general maybe there are some studies looking at this, but there is like a certain that certain people feel better in certain environments, which you say that and it sounds very obvious, but doesn't mean like, oh, I'm from this place, I want to move back to this place, but that places around the world can be of a type and that you sometimes feel it when you go somewhere that a place will just feel at home. And so obviously Lopez Island and the Pacific Northwest is where I'm from, but there are plenty of places in the world that have attributes of that. Like I go to Big Sur and I feel like it's like instantaneous the way like I feel immediately like at ease and like just a different like sense of myself and in relation to my surroundings. And there are places in, you know, Europe where I feel that way. There are, you know, so I that experience.
It's the trees.
Yeah,
It's the
maybe
trees.
It's the trees.
Let's
Yes,
just
I
go
mean,
there. It's the
truly-
trees.
Would you ever leave New York then? It sounds like a lot of
It's
those
so
places
funny.
are.
I know.
Yeah.
But I love this city so
Yeah,
much too.
yeah,
So I just
yeah.
feel like as long as I have
The access.
to it, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
would I leave New York? I'm sure I would.
Yeah.
It's not a never. I just have no plans to right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, the trees. I mean, the redwoods. I like
Can
the
we talk about
first
that?
time. Yeah, I mean, I the first time I saw them was the first time I went to Big Sur. My boyfriend took me. God bless him. I am such a like. Probably is coming across a little bit like I think any founder is somewhat type A. I like to plan. I also like I've always worked in like travel and lifestyle, so I do a lot of research. I think of myself as someone who knows a lot about where I'm going, what restaurants I'm meeting.
Mhm.
I don't know what happened, but like I just turned my brain off for this trip and he was like, "Oh, you know, let's go to Big Sur over like between Christmas and New Year's." I was like, "Great. That's somewhere in California." Truly had like no I didn't even like Google I don't know how he is so lucky that this happened. But so then we drove into like Big
Amazing.
Sur
Oh
and
my
we
God.
went to I can't remember which park we went to first, but either way, I just like I remember we pulled off and you know the first sort of like vista came into view and I just like burst into tears. I was like, this is the most beautiful place on earth. And I grew up, I mean, British Columbia is home to the world's largest temperate rainforest
Mhm.
and the second largest trees in the world. So
Wow, I did
grew
not
up
know
yeah.
that.
It's the largest rainforest after the Amazon and the
Wow.
largest
Wow.
temperate rainforest.
Yeah.
So, you know, was familiar with that setting, but the redwoods are sort of a whole different proposition
Yeah.
too. And I just did a road trip up the coast of California, Oregon, and Washington with a best friend and my best friend from growing up. And I warned him too. I was like, you know, we haven't hung out like this in a minute. I'm gonna cry a lot. Like, when I see the trees. I don't know how
Yeah.
to explain it.
Yeah.
And I really think you have to hug them. My
Me
sister,
too.
who I think my older sister is a little more, she would admit this, like more spiritual, a little more like woo woo. And I think she thinks of me as a little more like really practical and like, I don't believe in any of that stuff. But she was like, hear me out. I know you're not going to hear this, but you really need to hug the trees. I was like, don't worry, I'm hugging the tree. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
hugging the trees.
Yeah.
It's
I
really
mean, it's
important.
crazy, like the health benefits that come out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm reading a lot of like esoteric texts now about like respect and some of the like ancestral processes they have around trees, and that like trees breathe out what we breathe in and we breathe out what they breathe in.
Yeah.
So like it's this incredibly like symbiotic relationship that we have with them. And it's funny because recently, and this is like a tangent, but in our neighborhood there have been a lot of like they've been taking old trees down. We have a lot of very old trees in our neighborhood. It used to be a nursery, and they've been taking them down, and I'm like every time I see the truck come in, I'm like, no, like there should be a law to replant. Every time you have to take one down, you got to put one back up.
I mean, I
so
think
important.
of The Overstory by Richard Powers, which I think is like a novel that every person should be legally required to read. It is a book about trees, and he manages to accomplish it's quite a dense book and a long book, but like I can't guarantee this for everyone, but genuinely what he does accomplish, which I think is a miracle, is that as the reader, you come to care about the trees as much as, if not more than, the main characters in the book. And I mean that not like the trees, like the trees, like a tree becomes a character to you that is, you want that tree to survive more than any other person that you're reading about. And I think that is a real feat. And when we talk also about like mushrooms and things like that, I mean, there's a reason. There has to be a reason. I don't know the reason, but there is definitely a reason that when you take some of these substances and you are in nature, and I always encourage people to be in nature if they can be, it's going to be a 10 times better experience, like where you feel that connection.
Yes.
Whether you feel like you can talk to the trees or whether you just feel a comfort level around even like the tiniest blades of grass. I mean, I always remember that one time my older sister and I took, actually, no, both my sisters were there. We all took mushrooms together. And I remember at one point we had taken more than we meant to. And I do remember at one point that my older sister and I were like, oh man, like we were in what we felt like was this beautiful grassy sort of like private area where we were basically convinced we were seeing elves, like we we were sitting amongst the grasses and speaking with like these like elvish little creatures that lived in the grasses.
Amazing. And you both were seeing the same thing?
We were both seeing the same thing and
That's
just having like the most amazing time. And what is hilarious is there is a photo of us in this moment, and this was truly almost 20 years ago, and you look at that photo and we are sitting like in a gravel patch where there's like a handful of grasses. Like I can't, it is not like what we felt like we were experiencing.
Yeah.
But I say that only because I think truly even that amount of nature was like enough for us to feel like
connected.
So and we obviously know that the mycelium network and the mushrooms and trees have a really symbiotic relationship, and that the idea that like human beings should exist devoid of context of any context, let alone the context of nature, is like I mean that's like that doesn't stand.
We're animals.
So,
this is where we're from. Like it's really bringing us back to
a system that puts all of it as much at as much of a remove as possible. But I think that those things are very important, and that you don't have to be like out camping, but I just think having like a respect for your surroundings or a curiosity for your surroundings, even in an urban setting. I was in a yoga class this morning. I live in Red Hook, and both the teacher and the other woman in the class, somehow we started talking about, she was like, oh, I have these mockingbirds outside my window. And I was talking about like how I have a blue jay. And then we were talking about mourning doves. And it's like, we are in maybe one of the most urban cities in the world, but to still be able to have like an intense conversation about the little bits of nature that we have access to.
And it's everywhere. I feel like you just have to pay attention to it. Like I love the way, the ginkgo trees in Brooklyn where I live change their colors in fall. It's just the most beautiful yellow, golden color. And it just doesn't get old.
Yeah.
We just have to pay attention to it. And it's hard sometimes to find that, but it's even here. It's everywhere. So
Do you ever ask the medicine about the business?
I haven't. I'm not against it. No, honestly, it's really interesting because my first
I'm
instinct
like,
was
I think you should.
yeah.
I asked the medicine about my
I mean,
business.
I ask it. I guess I ask like because for like microdosing things sometimes, and I
Yeah.
really mean like a itty bitty dose where I call them like a nature walk. Like I take just enough mushrooms
Yeah.
to feel something, but I could still go grocery shopping.
Yeah,
You
Yeah.
know, and I find I do a lot of my best thinking. It's less, I guess, about the business, and I think more. I mean, and this is where I feel like I'm going to sound more woo, but more where I think at the end of the day, doing what you know when you're doing something that doesn't feel right.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
and
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know until you
Yes.
do something that
Yes.
does
Let's
feel
talk about
right.
it.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
but you know,
Yeah.
and that is on
Yeah.
every single level. Like,
Yeah.
you
Talk about that.
know.
How do you know?
I mean, again, sometimes you don't know until you know what it feels like to do something
Yeah.
right.
Right.
But I think it just feels harder because it doesn't, and I don't necessarily mean that it's more successful if you do
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
I just mean it feels easier, and so
Yes.
it is inherently better, even if
Yes.
it is less successful, like
Yes.
on
Yeah.
a day-to-day basis. And I
Yes.
think I just like I want to enjoy my days.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
really do. And I don't know if it's like an age thing, if I'm just past the point of like I'm gonna work so hard and then enjoy.
No,
I need to do both.
the illusion fades,
Yeah.
and you're like, wait a second. Because I think for me, like what I've found is that when it feels good, like what you're talking about, like the success comes easier
Yeah.
and that it's not like it doesn't feel like you're dragging a boulder up the hill
Yeah.
Well,
You're
with
yeah.
not
the
fighting.
semi truck.
But
Yeah.
also that is the success, right? The
Yeah.
feeling
Right.
good.
Yes.
I think that
Yeah.
ultimately that's what it's about because
Yeah.
otherwise, like, why are we doing
Yeah,
it?
what the
It's
Yeah.
a
fuck are we
pretty
doing
short
here?
life.
Yeah.
Like, might as well feel good while it's happening.
And
Yeah.
I
So,
think that like comes down to also like it does come down to business decisions
Yeah.
even, like
Yeah.
choices you make in terms
Yeah.
of who you work with.
Yes.
There are trade-offs there.
Yeah.
There are sometimes like people that I think would have made our business maybe more successful in a traditional financial sense,
Yeah.
but would have maybe not felt great to work with, or
Mhm.
would
Yeah.
have I would have not maybe felt great about where the money was coming from or
We've heard
how
that
Mhm.
story on
the
this
money was
podcast.
coming
Yeah.
from. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I not that we've been perfect at all, but you notice the difference.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about at least this category is I feel like you know, there's a really wonderful community of like people who have been through the ebbs and flows. And a lot of people have come, I mean, a lot of people are in this category for ostensibly the wrong reasons. I don't know if there's right reasons or wrong reasons,
Yeah.
but like generally, I think I want to feel like I am adding some value or doing something for some betterment.
Yeah.
I am not like I'm not like a pure if I were any more mission driven than that, I'd be doing something very, very different. But I think that like in general, I want to feel good about what I am putting out into the world. And I also want to feel like and I think this is just coming a little bit from like the media side because a stress test I would always do with brands I was working with or even like my own teams or the publications I was working on was if this disappeared tomorrow, would anyone miss it? Because especially with like, the proliferation of digital media, for a lot of places it wasn't true. Like it could go away
Yeah.
and someone else, three other publications would just like fill that niche.
Yep.
And I think that's something I think about on a daily basis. And with Gossamer, I think, it's been again, it's been a very like volatile ride because of the category. We are in a very good place
Yeah.
currently, but I've always felt like at least I feel like if we shut down tomorrow or a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago, like we will have done something.
Yeah.
And like if you like look back at cannabis legalization in the US from 2010 to 2025 or something like that, that we would get some sort of like bullet
Yes.
point
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
minimum of like whether it's about the branding, whether it was about, changing the conversation, whether it was about engaging with women. Like I feel very and I'm comfortable saying it, I think people should be able to say that like I think we have done something special that no one else did.
1,000%. Yeah.
And that is I think if you don't feel that, if you don't have some conviction either on like what you've already done or what you believe you can still do, it's impossible to get up and keep going.
Yeah.
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 It
Yeah.
really is.
Totally.
for me, like, you put this on my radar because I'm a fashion kid too.
Yeah.
And whenever I see something that's like really well done and good taste and like is design oriented and like inspirational and aspirational, I take note. And so I think that just speaks to like the authenticity of this mission for
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you have to say about copycats? Because, man, there is
Yeah.
one recently that I'm like, okay, that's like the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think copycats are going to happen no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
I think, especially on the creative side, everything is a reference,
Yeah.
right? Like nothing, everything, we are all inspired by certain things. We have mood boards. I think, but I think the best references honor what came before it and
Yeah.
even like acknowledge it or, you know, I don't want to say better it because that's not necessarily like that creates some sort of like value system, but like
Sure.
add some point of value or some point of
Or
differentiation.
like modernity or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or a different perspective on it or something. On the one hand, we've been like we have seen a lot of copycats and mimicry, even not necessarily even in our category. There's a brand that I remember at one point. I don't remember the specifics, but basically, I believe the creative director or the woman who had been like hired to do some of the brand design like reached out to us because
No
basically
way.
the founder had put like us on the mood board and was like, I want that,
Wow.
and that's great. That is a compliment.
Yeah.
But
Thank
then
you.
it's like you look at their site and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, then they got that,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
down to the fonts, the colors, the like
gosh.
Wow.
the
Yeah.
typefaces, like
Wow.
it's fine. Sure,
Sometimes
it's
I'm
a
like,
different
do
category.
certain
No one
people not
cares.
understand
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like you cannot do that?
Yeah.
I sometimes want to actually, especially non-creatives, do they not have respect?
I think they
No.
can't. I think they
Yeah.
don't think.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
don't-
think they don't. And
Yeah.
that,
But that's
but when you don't know what goes
Yeah.
into
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that, I think you
Yeah.
don't ascribe
Yeah.
the right value
Yeah.
to it.
That's exactly right. I mean, that is exactly why the value system around creativity has
Yeah.
been kind of diminished
Yeah.
throughout time and capitalism. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's yes, across anything that doesn't have like a hard number value assigned to
Yeah.
it, and not to diminish like people who work with numbers, which I have so much respect for because
Yeah.
I know what goes into it, and
Yeah.
I would have a hard time doing it.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. You can do it on a spreadsheet and the fucking program does it for you. Ain't nobody typing in creativity to a program. I mean,
No, but I do think there are certain people who are like creative business thinkers in
Yeah.
that way who
Mhm.
can like make numbers do interesting
Yes,
things like in a
1,000%.
way that I could never
1,000%,
or can
yeah.
think about them with other perspectives, which I do,
yes,
but
that is valuable.
yeah, the straight up mimicry, I mean, I think what you were alluding to and I'm fine to talk about was there is a brand called Houseplant that is Seth
Yes.
Rogen's line.
Seth Rogen's,
and
yeah.
I it's funny that that we feel knocked off. I mean, honestly, so we did a collaboration with friends of ours who have a company called Off Hours that makes these beautiful home coats that they coined the term the home coat. They describe their
It's kind of
brand
like
product.
a comforter coat, right?
Yeah, it
like
looks
it's like
a duvet, like a wearable
it's
duvet.
like a yeah,
Ooh,
it's
I
like
love
down or
that.
something, yeah.
Yeah, and it's
beautiful.
they put a lot of care into the business and they've just been quietly and passionately like growing it. It's honestly a side project for both of them. They're both like very successful founders with other businesses too. And we very early on, because we were sharing an office, saw these coming in as their samples, and we were like, let's do a collaboration. This is such a good fit for us. Stoners love like a wearable duvet. There's a term for a mini joint in cannabis called a dog walker, which is meant to say like you could smoke it while you're walking the dog. And we thought it would be fun to call the coat like the dog walker, and the joke would be like you could wear it to walk the dog, you could wear it to go to the bodega, to pick up your snacks.
love
You could
that.
wear it to like read at home on the couch. And we put a lot of care into making that. And then Houseplant, I think more recently, I honestly don't even know when they first released it, but they released I think they called their house coat.
Yeah.
I mean, Houseplant,
Yeah,
house coat, home coat.
yeah.
And it's, very similar in color, very similar in design.
No,
and
like
again,
it's like
not,
it looks like the exact same thing.
Yeah.
To me, as
and a lot of people thought
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was by Off Hours, our
Yeah.
friends who had actually like made this product.
Yeah.
And so I was just sort of taken aback because we do know a lot of the people on that team over there.
Yeah.
And I know for sure they know about us. We've had conversations about it. Like,
Did you reach out to them?
we chatted with our friends at off hours, and they were like, we've been knocked off by
Yeah.
Zara. Like they were just like,
Wow.
what are you gonna do? And
Yeah.
I appreciate that perspective, but I also think, I don't know, I find Eva Gokachea, who we just talked about, I find her very inspiring in terms of like, she's just
Yeah,
very
she just doesn't care. Yeah,
outspoken.
yeah.
And
She's like,
I
whatever, moving
think,
on.
yeah, but she's outspoken about it.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
she'll
for
call
sure.
someone out. And I think Melanie mess around with Gia is similar because she's had a lot of people. There are some brands that look just like Gia in that category.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to sort of point that out and be like, hey, just FYI, because I think consumers don't always know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think to protect the value of your own creations, even if you can't do anything about it, I don't know. So yes, I mean, I posted about it. I more just to bring attention to it because I also think it is just so often creativity is co-opted by larger brands with more resources. And that I think is the more frustrating thing because it can ultimately harm the businesses that like maybe pioneered a certain idea or a certain design. It was this thing hurting our business? No, because we're not, that was a limited edition product for us. We're not even selling it. I guess it's hurting it in as much as people might confuse that
Yeah,
product with ours. And
exactly.
that product I don't think of as having been anywhere near the same quality or design or even how it was made. But again, and I've said this before, I don't think Seth Rogen himself even
Yeah, he
knows
probably
that,
doesn't know.
like,
Yeah.
and I think he's actually quite involved in the business, but he doesn't, it's like he's probably got a big
He
team.
probably saw it hanging on a hanger and
And
was
like,
like,
that's great.
I
Let's do
need
that.
Totally
this.
do it.
Yeah,
Like,
or who
let's
knows?
do this.
Fine. It's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah.
I have also like, make more like wearable stuff for stoners to be comfortable at home.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. Just don't you do
Yeah.
your own
Yeah.
It's
thing
a
with
little
it.
close.
Yeah.
It's a little close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my general perspective is just, I think it's worth pointing out sometimes, even just to be able to, I think you should be comfortable stating the value of your own work.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. It is.
that's more what it is than
Yeah.
anything else.
We're going to wrap it up with a few rapid questions for
Okay.
you.
Sit up.
Okay. What would you say is your life's purpose and how does it align with your business?
I look forward to figuring out my life's purpose. Things I believe very strongly in are community, meaning both like family and friends and the people you surround yourself with, which is to say, when you work, which is how we spend most of our lives, it's also the people you work with. So I think in terms of how I run my business, that I think influences every decision we make, like whether it is about the customers or the theoretical community that we might be addressing or that we want to engage with, or whether it's the people we work with from like a on a tiny entry level role to like a creative director role or even a contributor perspective. I just feel like I always want to ensure I'm surrounding myself with people that I feel good being around or that I feel like I'm learning from or that I can give them value. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah,
but
it does.
generally,
Absolutely.
It totally does.
Absolutely.
loneliness is a terrible epidemic.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's bad to be alone. I love being alone, but feeling like you have a community around you is probably maybe the most important
Oh my God,
thing
yeah.
that we have for the rest of our lives.
It's so true.
Yes.
yeah.
What is your definition of success and why?
Happiness on a minute by minute, hour by hour, daily basis. And I don't mean like if you're not happy 100% of the time, you're not successful. But I do think how happy or at ease you feel is a really good barometer of how things are going in your
Yeah.
life. And whether that's with a partner or professionally, financially.
So true.
And it doesn't always correlate the way you think it does. Like I have had times where my bank account has been, at its biggest, and I have not necessarily been the most at ease or the happiest. So,
yeah.
There's whatever that saying that I'm sure everyone's heard a million times, but like how you spend your day is how you spend your life. And I think that is how I judge success is like, how am I spending my day? Because if
I love that.
I feel good about going to bed every night or waking up every morning, then I'm
Yeah.
probably in an okay place.
I heard one creative director of a brand actually that we're gonna interview their founder in the next couple of weeks, but she was telling me that time is the biggest luxury and that
Yeah.
truly like what they are serving is you know, the ability to give women time back.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's so beautiful. And it really speaks to what you just said about like how you spend your day and your time.
Yeah.
Because that's like the only finite resource we really have.
Yeah, I think that's totally. And I think when stuff is out of alignment or out of sync or not working well, time feels like a very strapped resource. You feel like there's not enough time. You're not doing enough. You're not, you're working hard or whatever. So,
Okay. Lastly, any current books that you're reading or podcasts or Substacks or things that you want to share?
What book am I reading right now? I'm reading a book called Orbital by, I think it's Samantha Harvey. It's about a spaceship and some people in a spaceship.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Well, have you not read this book yet?
Yeah, it came out a couple, like 2 years ago, maybe. But I think, did quite well. I don't know how I stumbled upon it recently. Like I couldn't point to it, but I'm loving it. It's just it's beautifully
Are
written.
you sure
and
it's nonfiction?
Yeah, exactly. It is very meditative and sort of the idea of like what it's like to like look at the world or the earth from that perspective. Which that actually reminds me that I don't know if this counts. I hope it sort of counts. Pioneer Works in Red Hook, which is like an arts and cultural hub and sort of like third space, I would say, for the neighborhood.
Cool.
They have I don't know her official title. We've featured her in the magazine. Her name is Jana Levin. She is an astrophysicist, a professor of astrophysics.
I know
at
her.
Barnard. She's amazing,
Yeah,
and she
I've
has a
met her
podcast.
before.
She's got nonfiction books that I've not read. But she's a font of knowledge. She, I believe, is like their resident scientist or like science curator, and she oversees their programming. I think it's called their Science Talks. Which reminds me that on May 28th, I don't know when this is coming out, but in general, Pioneer Works Science Talks, which they release as podcasts, but they also do these in-person conversations. They're doing one on aliens and alien life, which I'm very interested in. And I've not recently, but in the past, they did one on dogs, which I went to.
Yeah, very cool.
It's like the science of these things, but within the context of our like cultural relationship.
Say
and
more
conversation
about why
around
you're
them.
interested in aliens.
I mean, I believe they exist.
Yeah, same.
So I think it's insane to
Yeah.
think that we are the only beings on any planet.
Do you think they exist on this planet or somewhere else?
No, I don't think they. I think if they exist on this planet, they're not aliens, right?
Ooh, I like that take.
But I believe there is other life in this. Yeah, 1,000
So you're not
times.
an experiencer. You've never had an experience before. Yeah. Okay.
No, but I'm very open to people who have. I love those stories.
Yeah.
And that's also how I feel about ghosts. I think they,
Yeah.
or spirits, or in general. I think that.
Non-human intelligence is what I would call it, and others. Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that.